Let's get rolling. Let's get rolling. I've got a few different questions here that people asked. If you guys have questions while we're on the call, feel free to send them over in the chat as well, and I'll get you taken care of. The first question that I got was from Jeffrey Coughlin. Jeffrey asks, where is the best place to find legit asset-based funding? Asset-based funding. He follows that up with a little bit of a clarification or a follow-up question. So we'll talk asset-based funding. So when we talk asset-based funding for your deals, these types of lenders. First, I'll clarify, what are the types of lenders that you can get for asset-based lending. You can get short-term lending, you can get long-term lending. Jeff is probably talking about short-term lending. He might be talking about DSCR loans, so I'll cover both of them. But for the short-term lending, you're really looking at three options. You've got private money lenders, you got hard money lenders, and then you've got more traditional lenders like banks. We throw banks out the window most of the time because they're just slow. They don't move quickly. And if you're trying to close off-market deals, you got to move quickly. So you as an investor, you got to do two things. You got to make well-informed decisions quickly. If you do just one of them, you're screwed. So if you just do well-informed decisions and it takes you a month to make a decision, you're going to lose all your properties, lose out on all your properties. If you do the opposite, you're going to lose out on all your money. So banks just move too slow. Now, where this changes is if you already own the property, and let's say it's owned free and clear, and you just want to pull some money out of it, a bank can be a great option. Or if you already own it, you bought it with cash, and you want to pull some money out to do rehab, you can do a fix and flip loan, and a bank is probably going to give you the best terms. You could do a fix and flip loan, or you could do a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. So that's on that side of things. The private money loans and the hard money lenders, these are distinguished by one thing. A private money lender is an individual with their own money. A hard money lender is an institution that lends money, kind of like a bank. Where this gets confusing is there's a lot of hard money lenders out there that are marketing themselves as private money lenders, and they're really not. Now, there's not any governing body that says you can or can't call yourself that, but private money lenders are individuals with their own money that they're lending. The luxury here that you've got is you can negotiate terms. You can be more flexible on terms. Usually the money moves faster and you get better rates. Hard money lenders is an institution. Let's say they borrow money from private equity or Wall Street, and they get that money at 8%, and then they turn around, they lend it to you and me at 16%, or usually it's a lot higher than that. They take the arbitrage. They take that in between. So they use that to pay their overhead, and then they use that to get a return to their investors or their owners. The hard money lending is great. It's completely valuable. It's good to use. I've used it before. I've paid as much as 15% and 3 points origination, and that's fine. It just moves a little bit slower, and there's a lot more rules. So there's less flexibility included. One of the biggest challenges with hard money lending is it reduces your ability to come out of pocket no money, say on a BRRRR. If you're buying a BRRRR and you're buying the property, you're fixing it up so that you can refinance and use the new value of the property as your essentially your 20% down. A hard money lender is going to require usually that you make monthly payments, whereas a private money lender, most of the time they're willing to allow you to roll that into the back end. So you can just pay them all of their monthly payments, their origination fees, and all of the loan costs out of the equity of the home. So what that means for you is you don't come out of pocket any money. Maybe an inspection, $250, $350 on the front end, but that's about it. And that makes it a lot more accessible for you to actually be able to close on properties, especially as a new investor. If you're trying to buy properties and scale, as a new investor, capital is king. So that's why private money lending is so valuable. So if you can find private money lending, that's awesome. It's more of a science than it is than people might give it credit for. But you just got to find the right people. And if you're communicating to them the value that you bring to the table, it's like giving them a glass of cold water in the desert. So that's the first component. The other is hard money lending. Likely that's what Jeff is asking about, is finding legit asset-based funding. Hard money lenders are a dime a dozen. They're like an insurance agent. You spin around in a circle, you throw a rock, you'll probably hit one. These lenders do not have to be in your market. They don't have to be where you live. They don't have to be in the market that you invest. They just have to be licensed to lend in your market. So you can do something as simple as hard money lenders, Akron, Ohio. or hard money lenders, Ohio. Just use the state. And you'll find so many different lenders. What I recommend doing here is when you find 10 or 20 of them, send them all an email, put their emails in BCC. Then subject request or subject line is quote request. And then include in the body of your email what you're looking for. So if it's a fix and flip loan, so I'm looking for a fix and flip loan for a property in Ohio, et cetera. This is about how much it's going to cost. And get some quotes back. Then you understand where do they lend, probably what their minimum loan payment is or loan amount is, so that when you go to actually work with them, you know that they can loan in your area and they will loan on your property because it meets their qualifications, meets their standards. The other thing you probably want to ask is, what are their terms? And in terms, really, on a flip loan, you care about how much they lend on the property, up to 100%. And 100% financing is not a scam. It's not like it's not out there. I'll post about 100% financing, and some people will comment and say like, oh, they're all scams. No, there's some legit valuable lenders out there that do 100% financing. You're going to pay for it. Usually you've got your rates and your terms are a little bit higher. You're paying more in origination fees and doc prep fees and other ancillary fees, but they fund 100% of it. That's fine. So these lenders are all over the place. So what you want to look for is how much will they loan on the property. Usually they will, the language they'll use is 75% of ARV. So 75% of the future value of the property. And they'll often split that down into the purchase price and the rehab. A good hard money lender will lend 90%. They're pretty standard. Hard money lender will lend 90% of the purchase price and 100% of rehab, up to 75% of ARV. You know, one of the things you want to watch out for, Jeff, as you're watching this later, is make sure you check what their loan to cost, their LTC limit is, if they have one. Oftentimes lenders will say, we'll fund 100, we'll fund whatever, but then sneakily they'll say, well, we only fund 75% loan to cost. And that loan to cost means if you pay $1,000, they will fund 75% of it, no matter what. It could be that you're putting $100,000 into a property that's going to be worth $5 billion. They don't care. They're only going to give you $75,000. And so if that's prohibitive for you and you're looking for 100% financing, I would just pass on them. But as you look up these hard money lenders, make sure put them in your Rolodex, include their name, their location, or the person you're working with, the email, the phone number, and then what their terms are, so that you can go back and say, oh, you know, these terms really work pretty well for me for this specific deal that I'm looking at. So that's what I'd say. I would go Google. I mean, Bigger Pockets, of course. Another thing you can do is go into the watering holes where other people are talking about real estate in your market and ask them, who have they used? You know, the best way to protect yourself from dealing with bad actors is getting referrals. So I would go into the areas where they're living and they're talking and collaborating about real estate and ask, hey, what lenders have you used? You know, what lenders have you had a good experience with? Do this in the community, in the rentals to wealth community. I'll throw over some responses of lenders that I've used. I've had a really good experience with Certain Lending. They ended up selling a bunch of my loans over to another servicer that's been a headache, Fay Servicing. I would not use Fay Servicing. In fact, I'm going to put that in the contracts moving forward for loans. But them, and then if you're in the kind of Texas area, Renovo Financial, John Shipley at Renovo Financial has been great for both single family 1 to 4 and multifamily 5 and up. Those are two people that I'd recommend. I think they're really, really valuable. So Jeff's follow-up question is, what percentage is average on an asset-based loan? And is that my best option without good credit and deposit? I would say the best option for you would be to find private money. So find people with private money. And what I would, just the quick version of this is plan on having 2 calls with them or 2 engagements with them. You got your short pitch and then your long-term or your long actual kind of sales call where you're trying to figure out, are we a good fit for each other? The short pitch is you talk to people that you know, you call them, you text them, whatever it is, but you're asking them, do you know anybody that has these 3 qualities, that wants these things? So you say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm investing in real estate and I'm looking for financial partners that want to make some money. What it's really optimized for is people that, one, they don't want their money to be exposed to the volatility of the market. You know, someone can tweet something, or, you know, you got Reddit taking over, certain, GameStop, and you don't know if they're going to do that in your benefit or to your detriment. So they don't want volatility. They want more money than their bank account at Bank of America or Wells Fargo is going to give them that 0.23% that they're making. And they want it to be protected. They want it to be really risk protected. Usually these are double digit returns. Do you know anybody that would be good for? Because you're not trying to get everybody to lend to you. You can't get everybody to lend to you. Not everybody has money. You want the right person. So you're looking for the right person. They have those three qualities. They don't want the volatility of the market. They want a really pretty good return. They want it to be reasonably safe. I bet within 4 doors of where you live, anybody watching this, within 4 doors of where you live, there's some old lady with $4 million in her 401k or self-directed IRA that all she wants to do is spoil her grandkids. And her financial advisor is yielding 2% after fees, and she just wants a better option. So she drives a 92 Camry, right? Not flashy. You would never know it, but she wants a better option. And those types of people, if you ask enough, you're going to find them. So that's the first spot. That allows you, when you say, this is what I'm looking for, you know anybody that's a good fit? When you ask, do you know anybody? What it does is a few things. One, it allows them to opt in and self-identify. And so I've had multiple times where people have said, well, yeah, I can think of a couple of people, but me in particular, and sometimes these people, you don't even know that they have money. I'm thinking of one guy in particular. I didn't know that he had money. I thought, he was broke, maybe not broke. They were doing okay, but I didn't think he was going to have, $500,000 sitting in the bank. So it allows them to opt in. It also allows for a graceful exit. Instead of you saying, would you like to buy my widget for $9.95, all right, and really push them, it allows them to say, I really don't know anybody. All right. But when they do say, yeah, I can think of a couple people that might be valuable, you want to get a connection. So say, hey, would you connect me to them? And it needs to be a direct connection. If they say, yeah, I'll give you their number. Say, well, would you connect me via text? Put us all in the same thread, or via email. Put us all in the same email. That way you can connect with and borrow their credibility, their character, their credibility, their relationship with that person. That's the first part, is just get somebody to commit to a call. If they self-identify, you can say, well, we don't have time right now, but let's set up 30 minutes for us to talk, and we'll see if it's a good fit. On that second call, this is a longer conversation, which we can talk about later, but really the goal here is to figure out, are you actually a good fit? You don't know. I mean, I talked to one guy who I knew he had money, but so I went into the conversation thinking this will be a slam dunk. This is earlier on in my investing career, and I said, hey, what are your goals for your money? And turns out he's a computer scientist. He's got a doctorate in computer science, and he had built an algorithm that allows him to trade stocks. And so he could put $5,000 in and get 60 out in 3 or 4 hours. His algorithm worked once every few days. Like if he did this for 4 days, there'd be 1 or maybe 2 hits where he could put $5,000 in, get 60 out. And I told him, well, if that's your goal, and you want those types of returns, I'm not the best fit for you. But if you want something a lot more hands off, that would take them 1 or 2 hours a day. If you want something more hands off, I'm a great fit for you. All right. So it might not be that you're a good fit for them, but the only way that you're going to know that is if you ask them. So figure out, what are their goals for their money? What do they want? And then where are they at now? What's the current situation and where do they want to be? So where do you want to be? You mentioned you want, this is where you're at with your money. You've got your financial advisor. You'll need 2%. What do you want to be making on your money? Like, what do you want your money to do? They might say, I want it to do 6%. This happened to one of my students. I wanted to do 6%. And he kind of laughed thinking, no, that's crazy. And the guy said, yeah, sure, we can do that. They settled at 5. He got a couple $100,000 available to him. Awesome. Now that's a really good deal. I wouldn't expect that to happen, but that's kind of the 2-step process. So that's your best option for an asset-based loan. The next best is, if you don't have good credit and you're short on a deposit, would be a DSCR loan. And so in fact, Stan mentioned this. A DSCR loan is different from a conventional loan, where a conventional loan, they care about the borrower. A DSCR loan, they care about the asset securing the loan. So these are different types of money. There's a lot of different types of money out there. The conventional loan, they care about the borrower. So they care primarily about 2 things: your DTI and your credit score. Credit score as essentially an analog for risk, and your DTI being debt to income. So your monthly debt divided by your monthly income. That can't be over 50%. Those conventional loans, you can't get more than 10 of those on your name at any time. So you got to scale at some point and move to this other. Debt service coverage ratio is what DSCR stands for. And it's similar to DTI, but it's answering the question, if the lender's asking, of all the debt that I'm giving you on a monthly basis, how much is going to be covered by the income on the property? So if they give you $1,000 mortgage on that property and you're bringing in 1,100 of operational income, that's a 1.1 debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. So it's 1,100 divided by 1,000. Now, if you ever bought a property, you know that if your mortgage payment is $1,000 and you're only bringing in 1,100, you're in trouble. That is not a cash flow property. You are not cash flowing $100 a month. You're probably losing $400 or $500 a month because there's maintenance fees, there's property management, there's insurance, there's tax, all of that stuff that you have, those phantom expenses that you have to plan for. And this is where a lot of new investors make mistakes. They think cash flow is rent minus mortgage. Even if you escrow it and you're including interest and taxes, that's painful. So that's really then the question is, in fact, Stan's comment on 2%. Then the question is, what does DSCR need to be? Like what's a good DSCR? Most lenders, most DSCR lenders, it will vary by lenders. They have their own rules, but most of them are looking for above a 1.0, maybe 1.1. I've seen lately with rates where they're at and lenders hurting, I've seen as low as 0.9%. But if you're not, yeah, probably at 2% or higher, with Stan Scott, I mean, if you're not at 2% or higher on DSCR, it's probably not a cash flow property anyway. I've had lenders tell me, Blake, I don't even look at your DSCR values anymore because they're always, 3, 2.75. My ideal property, my mortgage payment, principal and interest, is about a third of the rental payment or of the rental income. It's about a third. So I've got a lot more wiggle room than you would on that, 1,100 coming in and 1,000 going out the door. So yeah, Stan, your comment on PITI, the principal and interest, when I'm talking about a third, I'm talking just principal and interest. Taxes and insurance, I'm including in other operational expenses that I'm setting aside about 40% of the income for. That would be taxes, insurance, property management, real maintenance that's happening, vacancy, phantom expenses that you need to save up for later down the road because it's a statistical likelihood, like it's going to happen. You just don't know when. And when you get surprised, you want to make sure you get the money there for it. So yeah, your DSCR needs to be higher. So that's what I would say to Jeff is, percentage average on an asset-based loan, 75% for a long-term loan, 75% LTV, maybe 80% LTV is fair. For a hard money loan, there are lenders, Renovo or Rehab Financial Group is one of the 100% financing companies on the hard money side that does 100% financing on flips. If you're asking what interest rate is reasonable, this will really, really vary. If it's a long-term loan, that varies by, right now the interest rates are really volatile at DSCR. With good credit, you're probably looking at 7.5% to 8% right now. With bad credit, it depends on where your credit is. You'll be able to get a loan if you got at least a 540 credit score. Anything above that, you're fine. You're just going to pay for it. There's some lenders that will go below that, but I haven't engaged with them specifically. So that's what I would expect on an asset-based loan. If it's a flip loan, flip product, I would expect to pay at least 13% and 2 points origination. And that might sound like expensive money, but if it's a good deal, it's a good deal. The numbers just need to math. So that's the first question. Jeff, thanks for your feedback and your question. All right, let's go. Gary, do we have any? We got any questions from those that are on the call right now? I'll answer their calls, but Gary's not on the call right now. I'll give him an answer, but if you guys are on the call, I want to make sure you guys get what you need out of the conversation. So send over your questions, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Okay, this is a great one. And the question revolves around what market should I invest in? Like what's the best market? It comes from Yodit. Says I'm a bit confused on which market that I should invest in. I've checked some markets using a few different methods, population increase, income, all that stuff. So why don't I do this? I'm going to talk about how to pick a good cash flowing market. In the rentals to wealth group, there is the cash flow market master class. That is I think we've scienced the market selection process better than anybody that I know. In fact, I've had other coaches, another coach that I really respect and think is great, tell me transparently, like, we don't really know how to do that. So we just tell people go where the other students have gone that are successful, but We've really scienced this. So if you want to go really knee deep in though, go through the market master class. You can, I want to say you can earn that at level 4 in the group, which to get to level 4, you just got to get people to, add value in the group. You get points every time you someone replies or comments on your post. So, or likes it. So on the market side of things, in fact, I will even, I'm going to bring up a window here and I'm going to show you something here in just a minute. On the market side of things, you want to know, will this market cash flow? And the way that what we use to be able to determine whether or not a property has a good likelihood, a good probability of cash flowing is what's called a rent to price ratio. Rent to price ratio, this is what you hear when people say the 1% rule or 2% rule. Back when I lived in Austin, Texas, when I started my investing journey, people said, oh, the 1% rule doesn't even exist here anymore. And I thought, I don't even know what that means. The rent to price ratio is your monthly rent divided by the price of the home. So you want this to be at least 1% to have a snowball's chance in hell of your property cash flowing. Ideally, it's closer to 1.5%. 2%ers you'll see every now and again. The higher, the better. So the higher that number, the more likely it is to cash flow. So that's on a property basis. The question then becomes, how can you determine that for a market? How can I determine whether a market will cash flow? Well, there's a few different ways to do this. I think the quickest and easiest, quick and dirty way is what I call the top-down method, and it's using high-level market metrics. So if we're looking at rent to price ratio, how can we find an analog for rent to price ratio that is at the market level? Well, we have rent and price. If you get the rent for a 3-bedroom, the median rent for a 3-bedroom in that market, and when I say market, I'm defining a market as a city and its surrounding infrastructure, but not an entire metro area. So I would look at city-specific statistics. The reason for this is it allows us to compare market to market instead of market to metro. Those numbers are going to be very different, and it makes it more challenging to actually be able to find helpful relative data. So the first number is the median 3-bed rent divided by the median home and median home price in that market. Just from I've pulled hundreds of thousands of data points on markets. If your home price, your median home price in that market is above $200,000, it's probably not going to cash flow. So you can just throw that out the window. But if you do this analysis, you want this number to be at least 0.9%. So that would be, a $100,000 property with a $900 a month rent. That's 0.9% rent to price ratio. It needs to be at least 0.9. Ideally, it's 1% or above. Now, when you're doing this, the reason why we go below the 1% rule is because this is the median number. So this is essentially of all of the properties, what's the most representative of the, kind of not average, but just your standard property in the market. The reason why we can go a little bit lower is because you're not going to take the crappy properties in that market, right? There's a bunch of properties out there that are really nice. They're high end, they're luxury. They're not cash flow properties anyway. You're never going to buy those properties if you want cash flow. So you're going to find the above average deals. So if it's above a 1% rent to price ratio at a market level, that relative number that we're talking about, the top down method, I think that's a pretty good option. You also want to look at once it passes that filter, that's a quick filter. Usually the tools that you use, if they're faster, they're less accurate. So this is a fast tool. It's not going to be a perfect tool. There's other ways that you can get knee deep in the weeds to validate this. But the tools like Rentometer, great tool, not very accurate. It's very fast. It's not very accurate. Zillow Estimate, very fast reference point on the value of a home, not very accurate, right? The goal is to just help you filter it out. So once you get past that, you need to look at market dynamics, market metrics. So we're trying to figure out, is the market healthy? Because we really want our home, the primary thing we care about here is we want our home value to continue to increase instead of getting down the road and realizing we owe more than we could even sell it for. You bought it for 100, a few years later, the market tanks and you still owe $70,000 on it, but you can only sell it for 65. All right. Now, the likelihood of that happening in the American economy right now is pretty low, but that's what we're trying to protect from. So you want to look at things like population increase, income, crime, things like that. One of the things that when people are looking at population, sometimes they'll say, well, my population is declining. And this is one of the things Yodit asks is, I found some good markets, but population is declining. What do I do? There's a 2-step process here. First thing is, if it's just a one-off blip, and the market's kind of doing this, and you just over the last year it dipped down, it's not a big deal. If it's declining over multiple years, the next step is what I'm about to show you. And the goal here is to figure out is the market, are the home values in the market still increasing? Because we don't really care about the population of the market. Population growth in a market is an analog for, is the market growing? Is it healthy? And theoretically, if there's the same amount of supply in a market, meaning doors, homes that can be bought, and there are more people moving to that market or being born in that market and living there, home prices are going to go up. So what we want to do is figure out what's the average home price doing in this market. And there's a really helpful tool for this called the home price index. So give me someone send over in the chat, give me a market you want me to look up the home price index for, and I'll explain it to you. I'm going to share my screen. I'll show you. All right, Milwaukee. Let's do this. You can see my Milwaukee, Wisconsin home price index. So the trick here is city, state abbreviation, home price index. All right. Now, when we go down here, within the first 5 results, you usually have something that says fred.stlouisfed.org. So this is the house price index from Milwaukee. Okay. Let's look this up. Now, this is an index. So first of all, this is from the Federal Reserve. So the data is pretty reliable. But this is an index. So when we see this number over here, 280, this doesn't mean $280,000. It means essentially 280% of what it was whenever it was initially established. So we see up here the index 1995 is Q1 is 100. So 1995, they said, hey, everybody in 1995 Q1, the very first in January, they gave every market a value of 100. So if we look forward or back and we see the number is now 85, that means that it's 85% of what it was, or it's down 15%. If it's up to 115, that means it went up 15%. Okay. So what we want is this market to go up, right? This value to go up. So as we look at this one, we see this goes up, it peaks around 08, 09. This type of curve is pretty standard for a lot of markets that we're looking at, because we saw the bubble here, it popped, the gray is a recession, and then it started recovering. Right. So now we look here, we had COVID right here, and everything's just been, this is what everybody's talking about as far as housing unaffordability. So everything since 2012, this is going up and to the right. So since 2012, 160, we are up since 1995, we're up, 317%. Now, if this were to start going down right about here, or if it were to start waning right here, I would be concerned, and I'd say don't invest there. But this is a healthy curve. So if you're ever saying, well, the population is declining, how do I know whether or not it's a safe place for my money? This is what I'd look for. Now, you can't predict, using past data. You can't say that just because past data says this, I can guarantee that this is going to happen. But you can only go with the information you got. All right. And so you're saying, I want to look at the health of this market. And overall, it's, Milwaukee, what we're looking at is very predictable. It was growing, it looks like 5% a year or so. What are we at? I'm still looking at that. Yeah, about 5% a year for 30 years. It inflated around 08, 09, recovered, and then now it's probably at like an 8 or 9% a year growth rate. So that's what I would recommend for you as you're looking at markets and you're trying to validate whether or not it's a safe place for your money to be. So that helps answer Yodit's question. All right, next one up is Gary. Gary, and we've got a little over 20 minutes left. So you got a question, go ahead and send it over. Gary's question, when you're using a finance company for purchase and rehab, one that says that they'll fund you 100%, what are your red flags against these said companies? Okay, so and he's got a follow-on question. The first thing that I'd say is 100% financing is not a red flag. There are a lot of companies out there that do 100% financing on fix and flip products. Now, long-term financing at 100%, that would be a red flag for me, unless you're in military, unless you're getting a VA loan or something like that. Maybe you get some down payment assistance. There's a few things there that are different, but 100% financing on a long-term loan would be a red flag for me. Yes, unreasonable rates is another red flag. Good call, Stan. So if you look at the market average of rates and it's 8 or 9%, and someone says we can do it for 4%, the chances are that they're going to tell you that it's coming from the deposed prince of Nigeria or something like that. It's just not it's not real. But your job is to figure out how can I protect myself here, and I've got a magic bullet for you. I've got a magic bullet to protect you from these situations, and I'm going to tell you in just a minute. But the first thing is 100% financing is not unreasonable. It's not crazy. Now, for long-term financing back in 08, 09, the reason we saw what we did was lenders were giving you 100%, 120% LTV. So right now it's 80% LTV, meaning you got to show up with the other 20%. They were giving you 120%. So you would buy a $100,000 property. They would cut you a check for 20 grand and say, thank you so much. And they would do that for people that didn't even have jobs. They were what were called ninja loans, no income, no job loans. So you didn't have any income, no job. They'd still give you a mortgage, right? That's how fast and loose people were playing with the mortgage rates or the mortgage products back then. And so when everything exploded and tanked, there's some regulation that came in and some sanity that prevailed. But it makes it a little bit harder to get properties. So what I'd say is first, 100% financing is not unreasonable. But you've got to know how to find those people and then how to vet them, because finding these people, like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Jeff's question, is you could spin hard money lenders. You could spin around in a circle, throw a rock, and you'll run into them. They're like insurance agents or car salesmen. Like they're all over the place. Like they're ubiquitous. So I wouldn't. People oftentimes new investors take this scarcity mindset when it comes to money. There is so much money out there. Like if there's a need in the market, what the beauty of a free market economy is, it allows other people to fill that need. There's a selfish incentive for you to actually start a business to fill that need because people give you money. And so there's a lot of people out there that will do this. So if you got questions on who to use or how to find them, post them over in the Rentals to Wealth group, and we'll get you taken care of. But the hard money lenders, even if you just looked at, you searched DSCR lenders and your state, you'll find a bunch of them. I'd go log 20 different lenders, put them in your Excel sheet, log your Rolodex, log their information, and then email them all and ask for their rates. Some of them will put them on their website, and their rates are a little bit less important than their terms. Meaning, what will they loan on purchase? What will they loan on rehab? And up to what LTV? And then what's their minimum loan amount? Minimum loan amount is a little bit more flexible with flip loans than it is with long-term financing. But even if you're below a lender's minimum loan amount, you'll run into a lender. If you only talk to one lender and they say you can't do that, it's kind of like you go to Burger King, you ask them, hey, will you give me a taco? I'd like a carne asada taco. They say you can't do that. Does that mean that tacos don't exist? No, you just have to go to Taco Bell. It's because they're not optimized for that. So if you need an $85,000 loan and they say you can't do that, it's probably because their loan minimum is $100,000. So if you just need to talk to more lenders, and it's no harm, no foul. I mean, that's their job. And so if it works, great. If it doesn't, fine. Just talk to more lenders. So that's on how to find them. But when you say someone will fund you 100%, there are a few different red flags that I look at. The first one, and I'll give you one just kind of fail-proof way to go through and vet these. One is the first thing that I notice is their red flag is the amounts that they fund are unreasonably large. So they'll say we fund anything between $5,000 and $8 billion. Or I've literally seen between $5,000 and $50 million. That is usually a red flag, because organizations are not optimized for that. You're really either optimized for $5,000 to $50,000 or over $1 million. You're not going to find somebody that's doing $5,000 up to $50 million. So that's one, is a huge range of lending products essentially. Another would be that, and this isn't a red flag, this is more of an orange flag, is they have so many different products. Like they do personal loans, they do kind of bail bond loans, they do payday loans, they do loans for a new bicycle, they do loans for a new car, and they also do fix and flip loans. They like there's too wide of a range, and lack of focus indicates to me that they're just trying to get as many people in as possible, and it's not trustworthy. So that's another one. Third one is they don't have an NMLS ID. An NMLS ID is an ID that you have to be able to create mortgages and lend mortgages in the United States. Now, this isn't a fail proof, because if they're lending their own money, if they're a private money lender, they don't have to have this ID. But if you search their NMLS ID, it's usually on their website. You go to their contact us or about us page, or down at their footer, you can find it. And then you just Google NMLS lookup. You can go look up their NMLS ID and just make sure they match. That's all you need to do. It's kind of like calling someone's references. Like I've worked with a number of different organizations, and lots of them don't even ask the references any questions. They just call and say, "Hey, you were a reference for Joe Bob. Do you work with you? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks." That's all. And they would qualify. They would disqualify people so well by that. Some people would say, "Hey, this is my reference." They'd call him and be like, "He never worked for me," or like, "I'm his best friend. I'm his gardener," or whatever. So that's another thing. Another way to find this out is they've got an email address ending in gmail.com or yahoo.com or something like that. So it's prime lending services at gmail.com. If you're in the financial place and you don't have your own domain, when you go drive past banks are usually the nicest buildings, right? If you walk into a bank and there's, the wall is fallen down and there's mold everywhere, it's not swept and whatnot, are you going to give them your money? No. That's why banks, the lawn is always done. Here in town, the nicest bank has the greenest lawn, and it's always mowed, right? And everything's clean inside. Right? So you need your own domain. It's probably a domain for a bank costs them like $19 a year. This is not an expensive thing. Another one is poor conjugation, poor sentence structure. So if you're whatever language you're doing business in the United States, primarily it's going to be English. And so if their conjugation doesn't make sense, this isn't a fail proof, but it's the first thing that'll tip my brain, right? Because there's a lot of scam centers, maybe in Nepal or India or Philippines, wherever it might be, that they're just trying to earn a buck. And so if their conjugation is really bad, I would start looking into other things, like what's their Gmail, what's their NMLS ID, or their email address, their NMLS ID, what's the range of products, the lending amounts. Their website looks unprofessional, whatever it is. Those are the things that are red flags for me. But the real question is, how do you get around this? Like, how do you make sure that you're protected? The first thing is, I would say, find recommendations, get referrals. And this is when you're finding your local team, when you're finding a lender, anybody important. If you can get referrals, that's gold, because what it allows you to do is just ride their coattails. They did all the hard work. If you find someone in your market that's been doing this for 35 years and they say, it took me 10 years to find the right property manager. I went through just all these, and they tell you all these stories about all these nightmares they had. And then they find the right property manager, and their life is just so much better ever since. You want to use that property manager, right? Let them do the work, just benefit off of that work and try and give back to them in some way to help them out. But that's the way you want to do. So if you've got concerns about a lender, or even before, when you're looking at lenders, just find other people, say, "Hey, I'm looking for a DSCR loan on a 5-unit. That's $340,000. Who would you guys recommend, or who have you had a good experience with?" You're going to get a few different responses. One is people that say, "Hey, I used this lender and it was a great experience." Those are the gold ones. There's also responses that are negative, that are going to say, "I used this lender, it was horrible, and don't ever use them." You also got people that aren't going to respond because they had just a meh experience, right? You want somebody that's going to advocate for them and say, "This was such a good experience." That's not a normal thing, right? Like if you have a great lawn care company, how often are you going to a Christmas party telling everybody about your lawn care company? That's not going to happen. All right. So when someone asks you, or you see a post that says, "Anybody got a good lawn care company?" and you're like, "Oh, let me tell you all about that." That's a unique thing. And so you want that to I would not take that lightly. You might also get other people that respond and say, if you make this post for lending or property manager or an agent, they say, "Hey, use me. I'm awesome." those are fine. You can add them to your list, but you want somebody that's going to go out of their way to recommend somebody that they don't get any benefit for it. All right. That they had a good experience. They said, this is somebody to use. If you are, if you're and again, new investors tend to think that there's less money out there than there is. So I would go ask that in multiple different Facebook groups, connect with people on Bigger Pockets, ask them, ask on Connected Investors, all the other platforms, ask. But if you say, I found this one lender, it looks really good. The fail-proof way to make sure that you're protected on the lending side of things, that no one's going to steal your money, is always go through a title company. And there's some states that you go through a closing attorney, but always go through a title company or a closing attorney. And when I say go through, I mean, you do not send your EMD, your earnest money, to anybody outside of a title company or an attorney. And so the best way to filter that is to say, hey, to respond to this lender and say, hey, this sounds great. I love your terms. It's awesome. Where do I send the EMD? And if they say, oh, send it to my associate, here's their information. Or they say, send it here, or you send it to me, or send it to my Venmo or my Snapchat or whatever. That is not, lock it down, put them on your list of never use and do not use them. And if they even recommend that you go outside of title or something like that even if it's a fee that's just like, oh, we have a quote fee for $495. Don't do that. You will never see that $495 ever again. Go through a title company. They act as your third-party accountability. It's kind of like, when you're watching the movies and there's like a hostage situation where the ransom is being paid and they say, we want $1 million but I'll give you the $1 million, but you got to give my daughter back to me. Liam Neeson, you got to give them back to me and they got to be alive. Right. So are you going to go meet them on a bridge secluded somewhere where they can just shoot you, take the money, shoot you and your loved one and take the money? No, you want a neutral third site, right? Where you say, I'm dropping the money. You bring the person that I care about, make sure everything's there, and then we'll distribute all of the trade-off, right? That's what a title company is for you. Your title company, they're doing a lot of back end title work as well. But one of the things they do for you is they protect you from situations that might get you screwed. And one of those is that the other team doesn't deliver on what they said they were going to deliver on. So you're going to bring the money, your EMD, and your other, your anything else that you need to bring, and then the lender is going to bring the loan. Then they say, all right, everything's good to go. Cool, we'll swap. Right now, you get the money. They now get the loan, and everything's instantiated. Great, perfect. That is your worst case scenario. There is you end up losing out on the deal because you saved yourself from losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right, it's because you went through it. Most of the time, if your lender does something sketchy and you catch it through the title company, you can tell the seller, hey, this lender was a schmuck, and you can extend closing. Now, sometimes with a wholesaler or something off market that needs to move a lot faster, and you're not talking directly to the seller, and they've only got under an assignment of contract for 4 more days, that's a little bit more challenging. But your worst case scenario is losing the deal. The most likely case scenario is they end up backing off or they ghost you, and you end up coming up with another lending solution that's a legit lending solution. If you ever have questions about the legitimacy of a lender and you're wondering, should I use them? Are they a scam? Send it over in the community and just let other people get their eyes on it. And get somebody else's sanity check. I think that'll really protect you. All righty. That is Gary's question on how to spot a scam and my vetting strategy for making sure that they're legit. Boom. Okay. So Dantes asks a question. Boom. Okay. Essentially, it's how much money do I need to get started? And his is specific to my program, my rental roadmap program. Said he talked to my team, and I didn't have any cash on hand, so I couldn't get started, but I can get access to that to the amount that I need to get started. So are we good? Yeah, Dantes, reach out to me. We'll get you taken care of. If you've got access to the money, great. That's fine. But what I want to do with the program is I don't want to put anybody in a spot where, if you're wondering whether or not you can pay rent this month, I'm not the right solution for you. If you're just trying to make ends meet, you probably need Dave Ramsey first, master how money works and be a good steward of it. Then when you're starting to look at investing, you move over to Robert Kiyosaki's philosophy and you forget everything Dave Ramsey ever told you. But if you're struggling on making ends meet, Dave Ramsey is a good option for you. Follow some of those habits, then start investing. But I recommend somebody should have 5 to 10 grand setting aside to get started. You need a lot less money than people think to get started. I started with 10 grand of what I called stupid money, just tuition to the School of Hard Knocks because I knew it'd probably be worth it. But I knew I was going to pay some dues on the way in, and so I saved up as much as I could, and then I started investing. And I paid it. My first contractor walked off with 12 grand because I didn't know how to pick a good contractor. I didn't know how to vet them. I didn't know how to manage them and provide accountability from a third party because I was doing this remotely, and so I was living in Austin, Texas, and home prices were $500,000 there. So I needed for 20% down. I needed more than I was making yearly at that point. And so I started investing remotely in a market that was optimized for cash flow. And so it was 4.5 hour drive away from me. And so I just, kind of took the contractor at their word that they're, honest and good people and trustworthy and all that stuff. And turns out I was wrong. And so that's, you want to protect yourself from that. But if you know what you're doing, $5,000 to $10,000 is enough, and you don't really even need to put that into real estate. Like that doesn't need to be money for real estate. I recommend it just as confidence money, as money on the side, so that if something goes south, I'm fine. Like my kids are still going to eat. I can cover an inspection cost. I can cover an earnest money payment or something like that. That's totally fine. And then everything else is going to be financed for you or paid for you. And then even with earnest payments, you bring $2,500 as an earnest payment. And then if you get a private lender to fund 100%, you're getting paid out whenever you close. They bring the 100% of purchase and rehab. So that's why I say $5,000 to $10,000 to get started or more. Obviously, the more money you have, the more options you have. Options are good, but it doesn't mean you can't get started with no. I've had multiple students that literally invested like their last dime almost in my program, and I'm thinking of one of them now. He's got 5 doors, and he's killing it. He's created $300,000 or $400,000 of net worth for himself and his family. So that's gold. Stan says, "What about down payment or insurance?" Oh, you mean for like getting started money, Stan? Yeah. So it depends on what strategy you're using. So if you're buying turnkey, generally you're gonna need 20% down. And so if you're buying in a market with $100,000 standard property, you're gonna need 20 grand to buy that property. Now if you're starting with a lot of money, uh, turnkey is great. If you're starting with $1 million and you just want to build $5,000 a month of residual income so that you can build wealth over time, awesome. That's great. I just buy turnkeys and just cruise in a good cash flow market. But a lot of people aren't starting with a ton of money. They've got maybe $5,000 or $10,000 saved, or maybe they got $30,000 in their IRA, or maybe they're just they've got a little bit of savings, but they want to start growing their wealth. They can use other models, methods, strategies. And if for anybody listening to this later, I know Stan, you probably got your strategy all ironed out. But if you're trying to ask what's the right strategy for me, like how do I actually do this, I'd go into the Rentals to Wealth group in the classroom. Go through the 7-day fast start. I think it's day 2 that I go through all the different, like a bunch of different strategies for real estate and how to pick the right one for you. Because you got to pick the right one for you and for your goals instead of the other way around, which most people do it that way. They say like, oh, I see my buddy doing this and he's making a bunch of money. I'm going to start doing it. When really, say wholesaling, they see their friend doing really well, making a bunch of money on wholesaling, but they don't have the time to do that. They want something more passive. That's not the right solution for them. So, if you want turnkey, then yeah, you're going to need at least 20 grand to get rolling. I think if you've got 40 grand or more that you want to put into real estate, not just sitting on the side, but you want to put into real estate, I'd say start with at least 1 or 2 turnkeys. You can prove out a lot of system process, and then you can expand other models like Burr, Creative Finance, Sub2, whatever. But getting started, if you've got a few $1,000s, I think the Burr model makes a lot of sense. If you want long-term wealth and cash flow, wholesaling makes a lot of sense. There's low barriers to entry with wholesaling. It's going to take a lot more time, just because it's more active income. Flipping could work really well if you want, again, active income. With wholesaling and flipping, sometimes on the exit side, you might say, well, I found a really good deal. I'm going to keep this as a rental. Great. But if the amount of money that you have certainly helps dictate or direct the strategy that you use. And again, I go through that in day 2 of the 7-day fast start, because you want your goals, when you're picking your strategy, your goals are off in the distance. Kind of like whenever you're, what is the metaphor where That the two kids, one is looking where they want to go, and another's looking at their feet, and they're walking in the snow, and they want to make a straight line. So one kid looks at his feet the whole way, puts one foot in front of the other, goes all the way to the fence, while the other one doesn't even look at his feet. He just looks at where he's going, walks all the way there. Which one has a straight line? The one that's looking at their goals, where they want to go. The other guy goes right, because they're just looking at their feet. So what you want to do is look at your goals to define your strategy, but you're looking through essentially the window pane of your constraints. So constraints primarily are time and money. So how much time do you have to do this? If you don't have a full-time gig, and if you've got zero time, then you probably want to do index funds or maybe private money lending or something like that. If you've got a ton of time, awesome. You got more options. And then money as well. How much capital do you have to put toward this? If you have literally $0, there are strategies for you to get started in real estate. But there are strategies that you can't use just because, it's like if you were born and you're 6'8", being a horse jockey it's going to be a lot harder for you. And the same as if you're, 5'3", being a power forward in the NBA is probably not going to happen. All right. So your constraints help, they dictate the strategy that you take. So that's what I'd say on that front, the down payment. Now, insurance is another one. If you're using a hard money lender, oftentimes they will want you to come out of pocket up front for 3 or 6 months of your payments or insurance. And so sometimes that can rack up to, if it's 90% of purchase on a $100,000 house, you got to show up with 10 grand plus any closing costs. Usually on flips or burrs that you're using a flip product, if they're doing 90% of purchase on a $40,000 house, that's just 4 grand. They'll fund everything else. And then on top of that, maybe you got some other ancillary fees that are, you got to come to close with $7,000. At that point, you got to have that cash. Or you can find, a gator lender or a private money lender that would lend you the gap. So a gap loan, or they would give you that money and then you pay them back. It's just a smaller private loan, essentially. Stan, how would you cash flow on a turnkey? This, you just got to find the right property. So turnkey, and that's really specific to your market. Like you got to find the right market. Cash flowing on a turnkey, when you buy it, you want your rent to be, if your rent's $1,000 a month, you want your mortgage payment, just principal and interest, to be about 30% of that, 30 to 40%. And so if you're buying a $100,000 property, you probably want a 1.3 to 1.5% rent to price ratio. So that means $1,300 to $1,500 rent. When I started out, I invested in Abilene, Texas. When I started out, Abilene, you buy a 3-bed house, 1,400 square feet for $90,000, rent it out for $1,400 to $1,600 a month. There's 100 markets out there like that, 100 cash flow markets like that. So now you're going to drop $20,000 on the front for your down payment. The way that you measure whether that's a good investment is cash on cash return. Of the money that I'm putting in, how much am I getting back in the first 12 months? For a turnkey right now, I think 10% is good. 10% cash on cash is a really good return. If it's below that, I think you could probably find a better deal. So, I prefer to buy private money lending and then refi into a DSCR to eliminate the 20%. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think, if you can buy under market value, say you find a $100,000 property that is being sold for 80, you buy it with private money and then you refinance out of it. That's gold. You don't have to come out of pocket. In fact, these are rarer. They're like the 1% of lenders, but there are some lenders out there, usually local banks or credit unions, that will sometimes lend to you 80% of the value of the home, even if you're buying it off market or you're buying it on the MLS. Because usually lenders for a long-term loan, they will give you 80% LTV of the lesser of 80% LTV of the purchase price or 80% of the value of the home when it's appraised. So if you're buying it at 100 and it appraises at 90, they'll only give you 80% of 90. But if you're buying it at 80 and it's worth 100 right now, they'll only give you 80% of 80. There are some lenders that will, one of our students, Matt Rogers, he's got one in Wichita Falls that are due 80% no matter what. And he's just finding properties at 75% of market value, 80% of market value. And he just shows up, signs the documents, doesn't bring anything to close. He's good to go. So, but what I would say is, for this strategy, Stan's obviously got some experience. He's one of those intermediate guys. But if you're brand new and you say, I found a property, it's 80% of what I'm going to buy it with private money and then refinance out, you have to be very sure on your comps. So when you refinance into a long-term loan, they're going to appraise the property. Say this property is worth $100,000, whatever it is. You have to be rock solid sure that it's going to be worth $100,000. Because if you just say, oh, I think it's probably worth $100,000, your worst case scenario is you buy it at 80 and then when you go to refinance it, they say, oh, this is worth $80,000. You say, well, no, actually it's worth 100. And they say, no, we analyzed everything. That one property that you saw is an outlier. It's in a different neighborhood or it's on a different street or it's a different spec or a different build date or what, all of those different qualities. And then you're left, you got your pants around your ankles and you're like, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. So just make sure that you protect your downside on that side of things. So that's what I would say. But yeah, that strategy is awesome. If you got private money to be able to take those down and just cruise into refinancing on a DSCR loan, gold. You can scale that really well. So awesome. Well, that just need more private money lending. Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, we'll talk more about that in future calls. If you got other questions, I do have a private money lending training in the rentals to wealth group. I think that unlocks at level 6 or something like that. That might be something to work toward that I think will really help you. We can also go through that type of stuff on the next Q&A, or if you send over questions in the community, I'll help get them answered as well. But yeah, the more private money lending, your ability to scale is essentially your, speed on a deal. It's a component of the variable speed on a deal, average deal size, and how much private money lending you have, or how much money you have access to. So that's awesome. So hopefully this year you'll be raising more and more private money lending, and we'll have you got access to $1 million of real fast true private money by the end of the year. So, well, that does it for our January Q&A. Thanks to those that were able to join. I'm glad you guys were here. For those listening on or watching the replay in the classroom, you can check the calendar for our next Q&A, and you guys can join, ask your questions. If you've got questions and you think of one right now and you want to send it over so that we can answer it on the next call, send it over at blakeswanet.com/ask. That's Blake, CHOISNET.com/ask. And you just submit your question there and it'll just put it in a list so that I can go through them over here on the calls. All right. It's nice seeing you guys. Happy investing, and we'll see you next month on the next Q&A. Talk to you soon.